Welcome to episode number 9 of Upstate Litigate. I'm John DeGasperis.
And I'm Derek Spada.
We are personal injury lawyers who practice in the Hudson Valley. We are partners at the law firm of Basch Keegan. Thanks for watching, and if you like the content, please feel free to follow us. Today we have a special guest. We have our very own Maureen Keegan, one of the founders of Basch Keegan, longtime partner. Thanks for joining us today, Mo.
Well, thanks for having us.
Finally getting to the invitation. Derek and I needed a lot of practice before we felt comfortable having anybody on.
But before we get into that, we have an announcement. You can now stream our podcast audio on Spotify and Apple Podcast. If you just search Upstate and Litigate, you'll find us. So apparently we're famous now.
I was just going to say we're going to have to start wearing sunglasses and hats when we go out.
I know we're getting there.
Crowds.
Bring your Basch Keegan pen so you can sign autographs.
Yeah.
So today we're going to talk about nursing home neglect, nursing home abuse, and the litigation that follows from that. But I do think we have to do a quick little bio here on Mo and talk to Mo about her law practice and very successful career as an individual lawyer and at Basch Keegan. So, Mo, Why don't you just tell the viewers quickly how you found yourself in the practice of law?
I graduated from Albany College of Pharmacy and went down to Johns Hopkins and did a pharmacy externship at the time, worked at Stony Brook Hospital thereafter, and decided I was going to go to graduate school, but didn't want to do a PharmD at the time. It was a graduate program because they didn't really treat pharmacists very well at hospitals at that time. I think things are different now. So I decided to go to law school. Excuse me. My father and brother were both lawyers, so I guess I could handle the conversations at the dinner table at Thanksgiving.
Your dad was a major support for you, wasn't he?
Well, actually, my dad thought it was a waste of time for me to go to law school and told me that I would be a diaper wiper and that I didn't need to go to law school because I already had a degree as a pharmacist and I was getting married, so why would I need to go to law school?
Gotcha. And your father lived to tell the rest of the story, or what?
He heard about some of the good cases I had through the years, so it was okay.
So how did you ultimately connect with Eli? Because you weren't from around here. You didn't live in Kingston at the time.
No, but I'm like about 80% of Ulster County now. I grew up on Long Island and decided it was a little too crowded out there, moved upstate. My husband and I were living in Manhattan. We had a child. It was difficult. As I say, we were literally competing with Donald Trump for childcare without the financial success he had at the time. And we moved up to Kingston, and actually Eli was looking at my husband, Dave, who was also an attorney, to possibly join him.
Part of the story.
Yep, it's true. And I ended up taking a part-time job working for the city of Kingston as a corporation counsel for a while, so that was interesting. So I had 2 part-time jobs, which was actually worse than having 1 full-time job with a little child. And then I had my second pregnancy with my daughter, and so I had to leave the job with the corporation counsel. And that was kind of fun in a way and interesting, and I learned a lot. And then I was working for a firm in Albany, and Eli had given me a few cases to handle medical malpractice cases because that's what I had done in the city. I had defended them, and when the firm in Albany didn't want to have part-time women or part-time people, it was 3 women that were there at the time, I told Eli I'm bringing the cases back. And he's like, you have to finish them. So I continued with him on a loose basis. And then eventually we both decided we liked to work hard and we would continue to work together.
Now, you for years lived in Albany while practicing in Kingston, right?
I did. My children were little and it was brutal commuting.
I can't believe you did that.
Well, cruise control helped. It's not crowded. I'm used to the LIE driving through that. You drive on the New York State Thruway for those years. It was easy just get back and forth. But there were a lot of tickets involved through the years. Anyhow.
Yeah.
So what
I'm
year
not
was
as fast as Derek, though, on the Thruway.
What's the latest you'll leave Kingston to go to, like, Albany for a CASP conference or for some court appearance?
Well, I try to give myself a solid hour, so I can obey the
speed limit. But even 60 minutes is tight.
I can
park.
But you can do it. You can pull it off.
I can make it in 40.
Wow.
That's fast.
Yeah. And then there's, if you get off exit 3 from 787 toward the Empire State Plaza, you go under the plaza, bang right on South Swan Street, and you're right at the building where those conferences are.
You got to know the parking situation in Albany.
Parking is bad, though.
Parking, if you can just drive in circles.
Yep.
But typically, if you go on South Swan and hang a right, down toward the appellate division, you can find a spot there
Yeah.
on the street.
And then if not, you just get the parking ticket and charge
Basch
it to the
and
client.
Keegan,
No, I'm
right.
kidding.
Basch and Keegan will
We don't do
pay,
that.
actually.
We
so
don't do that.
What happens?
Yeah, we just throw those in the garbage.
So Mo,
Yes.
Derek, you were going to ask her a question.
So what year was it when you started working with Eli?
Let's see. Jane was born, so it was October of 1990 or 91. 91, I believe it was. Yeah. So it's been a few years.
And how'd you manage to put up with Eli for this long?
Well, luckily I had that hour time where I didn't have to listen to him because even though we talk on the phone occasionally, cell phones were not as good as they are
Oh,
today.
right. Yeah,
so
you
it
can
was
remove
not that
yourself to some
constant
extent.
thing. Yeah. It was,
But
he was a little different back then too.
you and Eli, I think, have a very unique relationship, and like all relationships, you go through highs and lows. But
Right.
I almost view you more as friends or family members than as law partners. I don't know,
It's
discuss a
true.
little
No,
bit
it's
about
true.
that.
We definitely have. We got along and admired each other. I always laugh. I was with a big firm in Albany, working part time, and the first month I worked for Eli, he settled more cases for more money than this 30-person firm did in Albany or brought in revenue. And it just, he had a good month that month, and I just remember thinking to myself, this guy knows how to do this stuff, and I
Right.
should pay attention. And I did learn a lot. Occasionally, I would come to him and say something like, what are we going to do under these circumstances? And because he had trained as a law clerk for 4 years with Judge Aaron Klein, he does and did know the law very well and would often have some clever way to work it out to our client's advantage.
Yeah.
And I've always been very impressed with that aspect of Eli's ability to think outside the box.
Yep. And Derek's sort of, I have the advantage of being the young lawyer, the youngest lawyer in the group, and you guys having all this experience because I can go to any one of you, and and oftentimes you get different opinions.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I think Derek for me is the outlet for the law, and
I go to Derek a lot too because he
yeah.
reads it more often doing the appeals and stuff.
Right.
Well, you know what they say, the law is what the highest court in the state tells you it is, or the
Right.
country. So
Right.
it does vary and it can change.
So let me, in wrapping up your biography here a little bit, what do you attribute some of your success to as an individual, your success as a lawyer in the Hudson Valley in Kingston?
Oh, I've had good success and help from my support staff, which I'll include Eli as part of my support staff, which he would be horrified to even hear because he needs 2 people to get him anywhere. No, my husband, Dave, has been super supportive. And Eli was very good because I stayed part-time for a number of years when my kids were little. And then we moved down here when they were like a little older and stuff. So I think that's a big thing. And you just have to decide you're going to be successful and you're going to miss, soccer games and track meets and some of the things that you'd like to be there for your kids at. And I do think things have changed a lot and most people are able to go to those events, which is good. Working parents have worked it out for each other. That's the one good thing about the COVID mess and how people realize what matters is to
Right.
be around your family and to get, to be there for them.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for bringing me on because, I think you and
could
Eli,
tell them about your exciting interview.
my interview.
I wanted you to work with us.
You know what? I got to tell this story quick.
pretty funny.
Yeah. So Maureen, well, actually, there's 2 funny parts to you asking me, what are you up to? Maybe you need some work. So I got really excited when you first approached me. I remember it was at Stockade. And then I saw Derek. I don't think it was the same experience, but it was like another time. And I didn't know Derek well. And I think it was like a bar association event or something.
Yeah,
so I
right.
saw Derek.
That's a Stockade.
Stockade.
Yeah.
It's a summer day, and the windows behind are open, right in the front of the bar. And Derek's sitting there at a table with his back to the window, and there's an opening, so no one's sitting next to him. And I go and sit next to him, and I'm like, "Hey, Derek, like Maureen asked if I needed work, and I think I'd be interested in talking further. Do you have any advice?" And I don't remember. Do you remember what you said? I don't remember that.
Yeah, I said that you were working with another attorney
Yeah.
at the time who ended up losing his license.
this is right.
And so I was saying, my point was like, well, you probably shouldn't stay where you are.
Yeah.
Like, whether you come with us or go out on your own or go somewhere.
Yeah.
The point was like, you got to go somewhere.
You got to get out of there.
Yeah.
And then and that's it. He's like, you got to get out of the situation you're in. And then he proceeds to stand up on the bench that he's sitting on. It's like a booth. And he just jumps out of the window. This is like my first encounter with this guy.
Was there somebody after you, Derek, or you didn't want to pay the bill?
I don't think he wanted to deal with me. That's what I
I gotta go.
interpreted as.
I was like, I gotta go.
His night was over, and he wasn't going to talk to me about it. So he just jumps out of the window. It was the
that's
funniest
pretty
thing.
good.
But then Maureen says, "All right, why don't we have this interview?" And I was like, okay, sure. Would you like me to come by the office? And she's like, well, I'm going to go do this cross-country run. They do it every Wednesday
night.
And why don't you come? And I was like, oh, great. That sounds awesome. Meanwhile, I hate running. I have never liked running, still don't like running. It's not
Kind
in
of
my
athlete
being.
are you, John?
So I'm like, yeah, that'll be great. I don't even own like legitimate. I'm broke out of law school. I'm like, I think I went and bought new sneakers, So we get there.
He wrote them all.
And where was it? It was over at Twin Ponds.
Yes, which is confusing.
And so it's like this cross country run up hills and all this stuff. So we finished the race and Mo's not there. And I'm like, where is she? And meanwhile, like they're taking down the finish line where there's a clock. And I'm
I
like,
wasn't
this
the
lady
speediest
just
runner. I
bailed
just
on
like
me.
to do it. Yeah.
But I knew her car was there, and I'm like, this is weird. And meanwhile, we haven't talked about one thing related to work or anything. All of a sudden, they send this all-terrain vehicle into the woods, and 10 minutes later, it comes out, and Maureen's on the back, and her leg is bleeding. And I'm like, oh, my God. She's like, well, I guess today's not the best day to have an interview. We'll try it again. So then she tries it again. We schedule it again. And then that race, they like mismarked the race. So everybody ended up doing like 6 miles instead of 2. And it was the
brutal.
hottest summer day.
Yeah.
So she's like, oh, I guess maybe we'll try it again. Meanwhile, I've done 2 runs now. We haven't talked about this job. And I'm
And
like,
no
this
money
lady's-
discussions.
Yeah, right. This lady's a psycho. Meanwhile, the other guy's jumping out windows.
Right.
And then eventually we got the interview. We got a lunch. And Eli, I remember, wasn't really like the most welcoming.
Eli did not want to bring anybody else
Right.
in. No, he just thought he could keep doing too much.
But the one thing I took away from that interview process, you said we have to go slow because this is like a family. So it's hard to bring someone into this environment. We're a small firm. You guys were smaller before you added me, but we're still small. And I guess, like I said before, with any relationship, you have your highs and lows. But I probably see you all in some ways more than I see my family in certain weeks. So I understood I now understand the slow play there. But
Right, but we do get those checks from Emily routinely thanking to take you off her hands.
Right.
Kidding.
Right.
No, it's true. You do have to go slowly, and I do remember you were very anxious to become part of it. And you kept going, "I'll do that. I'll be involved there. I'll do that. Like, what do you want me to do? I'll take those criminal cases."
yeah, that was tough.
So yeah.
All right.
You were enthusiastic. We like that.
All right, well, now we're going to transition to the heart of the podcast or videocast, which is nursing home abuse and neglect. Maybe I'll let you two take the lead here because you probably have more experience handling these types of cases than I do.
I'll say one thing. I went to a nursing home a couple days ago down in Westchester to see a client who was injured up in Ulster County. And so he's just living in a nursing home. It's not a case against a nursing home. And I went there for his deposition. It was beautiful. It was the nicest nursing home I've ever been to in my life. It didn't smell bad. You walked in, it was like impressive. They had, it was like nicely decorated. They had some nice artwork on the walls. They had a huge saltwater fish tank. I walked past the cafeteria. The food smelled good. I looked in, like it looked good. It was like I want to go in there and eat.
You must have stopped to eat, Derek. You can't go past.
I do like
much
food.
to impress.
Yeah.
Okay.
But nursing home food I don't like. But then in Ulster County and locally, like just around this area, I've never been in a nursing home where I've ever said, like, I'd consider living here. Like, I'd rather just, like, put me down by the river in a chair and let me die. I'd rather just, like, let me just look at the water and die instead of going into a nursing home around here. They smell like urine. The past 3 or 4 I've been into, it smells like they mop the floors with urine. The food looks awful. Everyone looks miserable. And the staff, I know they're doing their best. They're mostly understaffed. And it's just a huge disparity. And I don't get why this, the nursing home that I went to in Westchester was really nice. And the
Such
ones
a
around
contrast.
here, it's a huge contrast.
I was when Derek told me this story about this nursing home down in Westchester, the conversation evolved. And I don't know if you feel this way, but when I take the deposition of a professional, I rarely feel bad when I know that they made a mistake. Like, I don't mind grilling them. But sometimes when I depose nurses in the context of a nursing home case, and I don't do many, I feel bad for them. I often think that the individual wanted to do a good job, tried to do a good job, but oftentimes just didn't have the resources. Like they have so many patients they have to care for, and it's just a matter of how do you do it all? And so Derek and I were talking that many of the cases involve failures on an administrative level to provide sufficient staffing and resources, but I don't know if you have the same experience.
Oh, absolutely. It's a disgrace. The poor people who are actually touching the patient and watching them are oftentimes not well trained, and somewhere between 2 and 4 people that are supposed to be on that shift called in sick, and there's no backup.
Right.
I have had the most outrageous cases, one in Kingston in particular, where they locked the client out of the nursing home, charged her as being in her bed when she wasn't, and it was the cleaning crew that came in at 5 o'clock in the morning, found her huddled underneath a tree in the rain, and she had hypothermia.
God. I remember that.
So, I mean, there are such outrageous things, and that's not the fault of, probably somebody who was trying to cover for 70 patients with one person or whatever they're doing.
Right.
And you're right, it is an administrative failure. Many of the homes in Ulster County are owned by a very few number of people. Mm-hmm. The corporation should be examined more carefully, and it is a ripe area for investigation by the state attorney general and other people because it is not well run.
Right. And I think people forget these nursing homes are, generally speaking, not all, but many of them are privately held companies that have a profit margin in mind, right?
Yeah. Well, and the lower the less staff they have, the more profit they'll make. If they hire more employees, that'll cut into their profits. Right. So they hire the bare minimum and put as little money back into the nursing homes as possible to get by. And there is some state oversight. Sometimes the state, I think, does a good job, but I think the state is also understaffed in this field because when the state does an investigation, they do it like on a case-by-case basis typically. They seem to do a good job, and I've had some cases over the years where the state has turned up violations and they're thorough. But other times, they do no investigation whatsoever when I think they should, but I think the state is also understaffed in terms of their oversight.
And that's also
Absolutely.
very reactionary, though, right? It's like usually after the harm has already been done, but the state does have some regulatory oversight of these nursing homes. But I was going to say, let's tell the viewers about some of the common themes we see in terms of the injury profile or the accident types involving nursing homes.
The number one thing is falls.
Falls, right?
And then they usually are elderly and have osteoporotic bones, and they break a hip, break a leg, break an arm. The hip is the classic one. And once you break a hip, you become immobilized and everything else just gets complicated.
Yeah.
What I tell people that come in and talk to me about something that's happened to them is I say, try to get people, your family, your friends, neighbors, anybody, just go in and visit them on a regular basis. If the staff is aware that you are going to have people in there watching and paying attention and not just causing problems, not just causing a ruckus and screaming, they will take better care of your loved ones.
Right. And also, I think when there are visitors, I think you're right that the staff tends to provide that patient with more support and attention. But also, the visitors can help you document some meaningful change in their physical or mental in the patient's or resident's physical or mental well-being. They may observe unusual behavior from the staff. They can take pictures,
take video.
Yeah. So we see falls a lot, and Derek, you're handling a lot of a common injury type.
Yeah, bed sores, and it seemed like for years, like for most of my career, you'd almost never hear about a bed sore, or they're very rare. And the people who got bed sores previously already had a really long list of medical problems. They were essentially immobile. Anyhow, they were really stuck in bed. And now I'm seeing bed sores, just getting a lot more calls about bed sores. And I think it goes to the staffing issue. There's been a change in nursing homes is what I think has happened here, and that the quality of care is not as good as it was in the past, and bed sores develop when a patient is neglected and the person just lays in bed and doesn't move. Even if they're able to move, they're elderly and don't move, or they don't get moved by the staff. The staff doesn't take them out of bed and have them, walk around in an assisted manner, or doesn't sit them up or roll them over or do anything with them. They just lay in bed and rot, more or less, is what happens. And
nutrition is very important too.
Right.
When you're immobile, you're not able to sit up and eat. You can't get out to the cafeteria and socialize and do things like that, which is also very important when you're in those situations. I mean, we've had family members through the years in places like that, and it is extremely difficult. But not only is there less staff, the staff that is there is often not as well trained, and that's a problem as well. So that's the kind of stuff that the state of New York should try to use their oomph to make criteria stricter as far as the number of employees per patient plus the training. And unfortunately, there's not as many nurses around as there used to be. People are tired of doing that job. That's a difficult job to do.
There's also, we've been talking about two categories of accidents or injuries that occur in nursing homes that relate to negligence, right? So people fall when proper fall restrictions or precautions are not implemented.
Bed alarms aren't on.
Right. The bed sores occur due to neglect. But then there's another category of cases called abuse. And these are, I think, really horrific. I mean, just really bad stuff. But that's another category where maybe, have you ever experienced with abuse cases?
Well, I considered it abuse when they locked the woman outside of the nursing home and left her in the rain all night. That was a form of abuse.
Sure.
And some of my cases have seemed abusive. I had a case where the aide gave my client the wrong medication and then didn't tell the supervisor what happened. It was their little secret, my client and the aide. And unfortunately, my client ended up going into a coma and having severe complications. And then this aide was the one who took the burden for the nursing home. But I have not had a case where there's been a physical or sexual abuse. I don't know. How about you, Derek?
I can't say that I have. There was a case where I think something more happened than just a fall to a patient, but it was passed off as a fall. But with so we accepted it as a fall ultimately, I guess. But with the series of injuries, it was hard to have the series of injuries from just a fall. They were on opposite sides of the body. Okay. Some injuries, or it may have been two falls that just maybe one just wasn't documented. I don't know what happened.
Well, you recall recently there was it was a scandal essentially, but over at the Brain Trauma Center here in Kingston, there was the staff member who was sexually abusing these elderly and disabled people, and we had a client who was a victim of that really gross situation. And I think also, according to the research, the abuse doesn't necessarily have to be something as awful as, physical abuse where you're harming someone in a physical way. It could be not cleaning the patient on a reasonably frequent basis or depriving them of mobility, if you kind of like lock them or shelter them into their room or not change their clothes. These are all things that are considered abuse. And the state, I think to your point earlier, has at least tried to set forth some body of law giving the patient certain rights that they are supposed to be made aware of. And
the federal government also has a big, long list. And most of these federal dollars are going in there, which is why some hedge fund operators have purchased nursing homes because they consider it almost like an annuity with a guaranteed payment from the federal government. Medicare is going to pay.
Right.
So they're not going to worry about it, and they certainly don't care about staffing. So it really is an area that requires more attention. And to me, the best thing you can do on the immediate basis, if you have someone in a nursing home right now, is just to try to be helpful to the staff. Maybe you can help get your mom out of bed or do something like that, because you got to work together. It's a difficult situation. It really is.
I think it really is a very challenging time for people. Now, there's distinctions between nursing homes, residential care, and therapy units. Sometimes they're all within the same structure, but there are differences.
Right. There's like memory care units where patients have Alzheimer's and require assistance with every single thing, eating, bathing, and all that. And other times people are just there because they fell at home, broke their hip, and they need some intensive physical therapy.
Right. But I do find I have seen trends or I think there is a trend where when someone is injured at home or in an accident and they're in their senior years, they get placed in some type of physical rehabilitation center with the goal of getting out. That person is particularly vulnerable because they can become re-injured. They're not as mobile as you'd like them to be, and I see a lot of situations spiral when that.
Absolutely. Plus the bacteria and the infections you can pick up in a place like that can also be worse than what happens at home.
I think one of the difficult parts of handling these cases is the families in this weird paradox where they really should be grieving. So if there's a death, right? It's like this person has finally expired after suffering in a nursing home. The family should be grieving. They want to grieve, but they're also angry.
Right.
They don't want to seem greedy or callous by going to talk to a lawyer soon after the death or maybe just before. But I think they're in a tough spot because they really should, because I think these cases are hard in terms of evidence because there's so much turnover with the nursing staff. And if you don't get on it right away, you're 2 years out and the nurse is now 3 jobs down the road or not around anymore. So I always feel bad for the family in that first conversation.
That is very true. I mean, and it's hard. That's what I say. Bring your phone and photograph, or even take pictures of the boards in the patient's room. Sometimes they say like 2-person assist, or don't get out of bed, or needs a bed alarm. And then, of course, you find out later on, 3 days later, they fell, broke their hip, and now they're back in surgery. It's a vicious cycle. You have to pay attention and watch out what's going on.
So how do you, as an attorney, how do you handle a nursing home neglect case? Like, what are the first steps? Someone comes in to meet with you. How does the process work so the viewers understand if God forbid this ever happened to them?
Well, the first steps that I tell people are to take photographs of the injuries if they're visible. So if there's a bed sore, take some photos of the bed sore, or physical injuries, bruising, cuts, whatever. Take photos of that so it's documented. And I typically ask if they've talked to someone at the nursing home, someone higher up in management, or a supervisor, to have a report filled out about the incident and see if they have. If they have any information as to what the nursing home told them about what happened. So whether they're more or less being upfront about it or trying to cover things up. And then the next step would be to get the person's records from the nursing home to see what the records show or don't show. The records are a little, I'd say like a little spotty in general from nursing homes. Sometimes you find good record keeping. Sometimes it's not so good because the staff is in a rush. But then we get the records. The records should be reviewed by an expert, typically maybe a nurse who has some nursing home experience, or doctor with nursing home experience, to tell us if there's a basis for a malpractice or negligence type case. You don't need that necessarily, but on a case against a nursing home, it's definitely good to have an expert.
I think you got
cases.
to.
Yeah,
unless it's
absolutely.
obvious. Unless it's obvious. If the person, if the aide drops the patient, you don't need an expert to say the aide shouldn't drop the patient.
Yeah.
But for something, a little more, any more in depth, I think you do need an expert.
At first, when I haven't had a big one. I mean, I have some now, but like when I first started, I handled a few and tried to just sort of navigate the records by myself. You need a nursing expert.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
because of all the standards that are actually imposed.
Right.
That you can use because you violate a standard, federal or state, and that is considered negligence per se.
Right.
I just want to tell you guys, this is odd. Yesterday, I came home in my mail. I had a thank you note from a friend who listened to the ad we talked about with the nursing home neglect cases and said, she's glad that we at least put the ad on the radio and do this through here. But she said, because you give people the right to think that they should investigate or they should, speak to people or make a notation about it, because the more people that try to fix the problem. There is definitely a problem in this area. It definitely needs to be fixed.
I told Derek, I mean, let's say for a moment you believe the literature, the statistics that suggest that there are not enough humans on the earth, right? We're not having enough children, and we're headed toward like a crisis in the sense that we don't have enough people to do the jobs. The nursing homes are going to be in a very bad spot because your elderly population will age without sufficient young people coming in to care for them. We're in trouble.
Well, luckily for us,
robots.
we have AI.
Robots,
right.
AI will take care of that, and actually, they're doing that in Japan a lot. They're using more robots to help.
Oh, really?
But that is what's going to happen. The good news is robots don't call in sick usually. I guess they can break.
That's true.
But they also don't care if they don't like you personally, things like that, which is part of the
they're not
problem
emotional,
too.
yeah.
Older people can be very difficult to deal with, you know, and it's hard to be nice to somebody when they're super crabby and you can't even get them, and they don't want to get out of bed. They
Right.
just want to be left alone. They get disoriented. Their electrolytes get mixed up. It's a difficult thing.
You'll know a better word for this or phrasing than I will, but that is part of the difficulty sometimes, and it does tend to undermine the quality of your case when the patient who's in the nursing home is
Incoherent.
right? There may be, I don't want to, it's not Alzheimer's. What is it?
It could be Alzheimer's,
Right,
but
it
you
could
could
be,
also
but
just be
Dementia.
Dementia, right? It's dementia.
Your electrolytes can get temporarily screwed up
Sure.
because you're not eating or you're not drinking or
Right.
whatever, and then even though you might have been fine walking in the door,
Right.
all of a sudden you're not making any sense.
But I think where I was going is like you have this physically healthy person, maybe in a state of dementia, then they fall and break that hip or they develop the bed sore. And sometimes it's hard to know whether or not they truly understood they were in pain, but they were physically well. And what's crazy is the insurance companies and the defense firms, they say, well, your pain and suffering claim isn't all that valuable because they didn't know. And there's some legitimacy to that really disgusting, inhumane argument, but I think that's a difficult part of these cases.
That's what the law says, but I don't think that's going to play well to a jury.
Yeah, it's a
from
hard
the defense.
defense.
They think
Yeah.
about their
Perspective.
grandmother,
Yeah.
not being properly, or their mom, or
The other thing I just want to say in closing is I think it's a very interesting phenomenon that in most nursing home neglect cases, your client isn't the person who was injured or who died, right? You're always
neglected,
dealing
right.
with their family. It's generally their children,
Yep.
30 years younger than mom and dad. But these children, even though they may be 55 years of age, 60 years of age, whatever it is, they're there advocating for, they're in our office advocating for their parents who were not treated well in their final days. And I think they're sad cases. They're hard.
And I think it's important, though, because if those people continue to advocate, they may not, it's not done. We talked about this before, the medical malpractice cases. Nobody ever gets a check and says, oh, thank God, that
Right.
terrible event happened to me or
Right.
my family member. So similarly, in these nursing home neglect cases, if enough noise is made, enough people complain, enough change can occur to fix the problem or get the system revised so that it takes better care of these people rather than just letting them sit in a bed, not get the right attention. Whatever it takes, it can be fixed, and it should be.
Yeah. All right. That's all we have on nursing home abuse and neglect cases. Good conversation. Thank you all.
Thank you.
All right. So now we transition to my favorite part of the show. Is it legal? All right, Mo, I got a
Yes.
question for you.
Go ahead.
Let's say someone is injured in a car accident or medical malpractice case, whatever it may be. What are the qualities people should look for in a lawyer when they're searching for a personal injury or medical malpractice lawyer?
Well, I always like to meet people before I take on a case because we take these cases on a contingency. And if I can believe and get along with them, I'm pretty convinced then we can get a jury to feel the same way. So that's why I want to meet people and have a rapport with them.
I agree.
We don't have to be the exact same type of person. We can come from very, different backgrounds, which is fine. I like that. But I want to know that there's the oomph, the, gut level link, as I call it, that makes you feel like, yes, I get what happened to you is wrong and I understand why it's wrong and I can communicate that to 6 or 8 strangers 2 or 3 years from now.
Right.
That's
Yep,
what I look
agree.
for.
Yeah, that's a major point, I also look. Ultimately, what I think about is, can I beat a summary judgment motion on their case? So if I can, is there enough there? Yeah.
I don't even think that. I think, can Derek beat the motion for summary judgment, which he does have great success at. So
is there, do we have enough facts and evidence here for it to be, I'll call it a viable case?
I'm with you. I think about summary judgment.
And then if you can beat that, then they'll settle. I mean, 99% of the time they're going to settle. And so you go to trial on those difficult cases, right. And a lot of the times we win at trial too, which is why they settle 99% of the time.
But I do agree with you, especially on those cases that seem like they're, have real potential to be a big case, or someone who's really, really injured. I want to meet them. I would prefer they come in. And we've gone to them, right? I mean,
yeah.
You've been to the hospital. You've been to people's homes.
Sure.
We go to them.
I will definitely go to them. But you just at some point early on in the case, you have to feel comfortable that Derek can beat the summary judgment motion, and that the jury will understand and have that likability, even if they're not a personal, they may not be a great person. There may be an issue underlying it, but what happened to them was the thing that caused a problem.
I also think by face-to-face meetings, both parties, the lawyer and the client, develop a rapport. And so no matter what the outcome is at the end, if they connect with you on a personal level, they'll at least trust you and feel like you advocated for them. And so even on challenging cases where maybe you don't know what the outcome will be, but it's worth taking or looking into or investigating, as long as there's that rapport and that as you say,
that helps, because later on, like I have one recently where a college kid from New Paltz fell, and the law is very unfavorable to us. And I've been very frank with her, and the good news is she's had a good heal. Yep. And I've talked with her parents, and we're not going to pursue the case now because it's not going to be worth it for her or for us.
Yep.
All right, Mo, can medical malpractice cases lead to criminal charges against either a doctor or healthcare provider?
Well, it certainly can happen. And the famous case in the Hudson Valley was... his name was in the newspaper, so I don't think I'm violating any court orders. There was a physician, Dr. Panos, who was operating on people. And actually, it's very interesting to me because he was loved by many of the people. I've had clients who actually he did surgery on, and it turns out he actually didn't do surgery. He would open them up, poke around inside the knee or shoulder or whatever he was doing, and then close them up. And people would swear they got great results. It was very interesting. And they liked him. He had great bedside manner. But eventually it was determined, I believe there was some billing issues, that he had too many surgeries done in a short period of time, that they couldn't have possibly been completed, and it raised some red flags, and the investigation took place. And that went on for a long time, probably more than 10 years between when it was first interested, like there was a problem with it and they found out about it until it was resolved. But that was criminal charges were brought against him too. So it can happen.
But that was he was brought up on like RICO charges, right? He was like, because he was billing insurance companies and Medicaid and Medicare for things.
Yeah,
right.
It
was money and
Medicare,
greed.
Yeah, it was the Medicare fraud, because that's federal, federal dollars that were going to him. So that's why he ended up with federal charges. I think he had state charges against him.
And actually, interesting, he went to jail and was reviewing files in jail, and they charged him again. He was using somebody else's name.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I forgot about that. Yeah,
what was he doing? Like IMEs or something?
Like,
I don't know if it was IMEs,
medical file reviews in jail under some other doctor's license number.
Wow.
But isn't it more interesting? I thought it was unbelievable that so many people loved him as a surgeon. They thought he had great hands and he was a wonderful surgeon. And he this
recent report that suggests that these arthroscopic exploratory surgeries really like have no benefit. So some people may not have even known the difference, right? It's like a placebo. If you think you had the surgery, you feel better.
You get that scar to know I'm better now.
Right,
now I have a scar on my leg.
All right. So now we go from is it legal to let's get local. Ooh, favorite place to go trick or treating in Ulster County?
It's got to be Eli's house.
I would disagree. And so I'm going to say Lounsbury Place. And we usually stop by Mo's sister's house. They get full-size candy bars like Eli. And Mo and Dave are usually there. So it's like usually a fun interaction. Don't they usually put some music out front or something?
Spooky music and all this.
And
so
nice
I'm going to give you the backstory to that trick-or-treating and Eli giving out full bars. We were living on Euclid Ave in Albany, New York, close to St. Peter's. And my kids were little. We're out there trick-or-treating. And Judge Cheeseman, who was a judge in the Court of Claims, I believe, would open the door and have all of the candy bars on a beautiful silver tray. And I just still remember this. It's late at night. The kids are dressed up as Pac-Man or something, leopards, and he opens the door and on this beautiful tray, the full candy bars. The kids' eyes just bugged right out of their head. And when I came to the office the next time, I told Eli about it. And from then on in, he does the same thing. And my sister, too, because they want to be known as the guys with the big candy bars, which is great.
And I'll also say, too, before we get to your sister's house, we go to my neighbor's house. He's also a lawyer. I think lawyers must just be good at trick-or-treating and giving out candy, because my neighbor's Bill Pretch.
Oh, he's the best.
They give out really unusual treats. So
Yes.
one year was like candied apples. But for all these kids, we live in a very busy neighborhood. Candied apples. Last year was honey. The year before was popcorn, but the kernels with the butter.
Really fancy and done nicely.
They did like really fancy chocolate lollipops one year, really thoughtful. So we stopped by their house, then we go to your sister's.
Yeah, I'd say Lounsbury does.
So Derek, you lived in Kingston and in a relatively busy neighborhood where you can do some great trick-or-treating, but now you live out in the sticks in Woodstock. So what's your where's your ideal trick-or-treating spot?
We go to a friend's house in Kingston and go out there. It's
what neighborhood?
Between North Manor and Richmond Park.
Oh yeah, that's trick or treating.
Those houses are all pretty close together. A lot of ground in there to cover with lots of houses.
A lot
in there.
of candy bars for a short time.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to say you would do the main fair
the Woodstock
in Woodstock.
Parade. Yeah, well, that's right. Yeah, we start there. So the parade. I think the parade is at either 4 or 5 o'clock. I think it's 5 o'clock is the parade, but the storefronts in Woodstock all have candy.
Right.
So my kids would go to all the stores in Woodstock first and hit up the main drag there with all the stores, and then we head down to Kingston.
Is that Halloween parade in Woodstock worth going to?
Yeah, it's fun.
Is it as much fun as New York City, Greenwich Village?
It's not quite like the Greenwich Village Halloween.
I have to get there. I've never been to that.
Oh yeah, that's an experience. Yeah.
I want to get there. It's on my list.
I'm not going there with kids.
No.
All right, so now we have closing arguments.
Well, Derek and John, thank you both for having me on as your guest and letting me speak.
Fun having you on. Thanks for joining.
Had fun. And thanks for listening at home or in your car or jogging on one of those miserable races that John was talking about with your AirPods in. But again, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, and we hope you enjoyed this episode.